Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm J.C. Cannon, part of the Corporate Privacy Group. One of the first things I want to do is apologize for the heat. There have been several work requests in to sort of alleviate the problem, but for now we'll just have to sort of get through this. I'm running the External Privacy Researcher Program, which is a program that lets external researchers work with Microsoft on privacy-related issues. Of course, Dr. Alfred Copes is one of our elite members on this team, and what we're providing these researchers is the opportunity to come to Microsoft and give presentations in the area of privacy. After the presentation, of course, you're free to correspond with him. Any questions you might have, or if there's any related topics you want to discuss with Alfred, feel free to email him directly. To get to this website, you go to MSR Web, the research area, and you notice there's a security and privacy list or category, and underneath there's MSR Privacy, and you get to the internal and external privacy links to find out who's working on privacy inside of Microsoft and outside of Microsoft. Now, Dr. Alfred Copes comes to us from the University of California via Germany. He's actually been a professor in Germany at the University of, Essen. Thank you very much. He's also director of the Research Institute over there, the Center for Information Technology. His research lies in the area of user modeling and personalized systems, privacy, and he's also the editor of User Modeling and User-Adapted Interaction. I'll bring his presentation up, and I welcome Dr. Alfred Copes.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? I'm not quite sure, but I think it's on. All right. I first like to give a brief survey of personalization and privacy issues that are related to personalization. Please alert me if it gets too basic. So personalization is already there. A while ago, Forrester Research did a small survey on what kind of personalization elements you can currently find on the web, and they found, well, tailored email alerts, people sign up for certain information by email, customized content like your preferred stocks on some portal, recommendations like Amazon, express transactions, targeted marketing. Yes?
This is a percentage?
No, they looked at the top 1,000 websites and summarized what each website offered. So the percentages add up to more than 100. It's also a few years old. Now we are on the brink to far more personalization, like web courses that tailor to each individual student, information recommendation on handheld devices that's already here in Asia. Product descriptions get nowadays more and more geared towards the knowledge of each individual visitor. We already have personalized search. Media preferences get more and more taken into account, and we also have recommendation on the web. It's already quite a few websites that use this. So personalization is already part of the web to the extent that people already expect it. There's a couple of nice anecdotes that people believed it was personalization, while actually there was no personalization going on. So people kind of already get used to it. In 30 seconds, how does personalization work? Essentially, it's based on two types of data. First, data that the user explicitly supplies, and probably even more importantly, logs of web pages that user visits actions that user performs on web pages. And there's 3 groups of methods. In one, researchers, HCI experts, first look at the people who access websites and group them into different subgroups and determine their needs, preferences, etc. And when a new visitor comes, the website tries to allocate this person to one or more of these subgroups and then geared to the needs of the specific groups. Another is simple rules, business rules. If the user does this and this and this, or enters this and this and this, then do the following. Can be sometimes quite complex, but it's usually also handmade, so pre-analysis and then hard-coded rules. And the third area, and that's a huge area, is machine learning, where websites learn about certain user characteristics, make inferences about user characteristics. So there is surely hundreds of different methods that are currently being used in personalization, and the big competition is what methods are suited better for what purpose.
So, by the way, so assignment for the group, is that also done by machine learning, like classification?
Can be done, yes. The traditional way is, that's how it started out, is to pre-analyze. But of course, you can do some sort of cluster analysis. You can do both. So there's a variety of approaches. There is already studies that show that personalization delivers benefits to both web visitors, but also to websites that offer personalization. So those were mostly made in 98, 99 by market research firms. So Jupyter found that the number of visitors increased at personalized websites, which is nice, but does not say very much. Nielsen found that visitors stayed longer, also that more visitors are turned into buyers than at regular websites. Gartner predicted that by 2003, 85% of all the top 1,000 websites would have some element of personalization included. I'm not sure.
How did they do?
They predicted it, yeah. My hunch, they were not right by 2003, but now by 2005, probably yes. If any little detail counts, yes, probably. Jupyter, 3 years later after the boom, did a retrospective analysis and found, yes, but personalized sites cost 4 times more than regular sites. And few users indicate that personalization would make them buy, but nevertheless, they do buy. So there is some research that shows that recommendation, cross-recommendation does work, at least for some companies.
Based on your research, do you have any sense about how much of this they would still agree with? Like, would Jupyter and Nielsen say that today? That what they said then is still pretty much on target? Or?
I mean, it's hard to replicate their study because top websites now do have elements of personalization built in. So you cannot compare non-personalized with personalized sites very much anymore, unless you go to infrequently visited sites. And again, here it's hard to make a comparison.
And what about return on investment?
Right, 4 times as much to operate, but what about cost savings in terms of? Amazon, this cross-recommendation. People who bought this also bought this. Right, presumably generates income.
Yes, exactly. The official number from the former chief scientist is more than 20% additional revenues.
But is it really worth the extra expenditure?
That's the answer I just gave. Yeah. Amazon says officially more than 20% add-on revenues by cross-recommendation.
Does that
The
compensate them?
unofficial numbers that I heard from him are higher than 20%. Yeah.
Does that truly compensate them for the additional cost?
This I don't know. But if it wouldn't be the case, they wouldn't do it. They do all sorts of experiments. You probably notice it yourself once in a while. Things happen at Amazon. They simply play with their millions of users. And if things don't work, they wouldn't apply it to the broad audience. You had a question?
In the case of the top bullet for Jupiter in 2003, which is the cause and which is the effect?
I question the whole study in itself. Yeah. Good. I just wanted to be fair, yeah, not to only bring positive notes, because we will hear later, asking people is a good start, but it does not necessarily give you the right answer or the full answer. Yeah, now the downside, big downside, personalized sites collect far more personal data about the individuals than regular websites. And as a matter of fact, personalization is based on personal data. And as we all know, there is currently a big concern of internet users about their privacy online. So there have also been numerous studies being done in the early 2000s by many organizations. So it's a market research consulting firm. This is the American Association of Retired People. IBM did a study across several countries. The numbers differ a little bit, but in total they all show that if you ask people, they all express concern or even a strong concern about divulging personal information online, being tracked. They are not only concerned, but they claim that they already took actions in the past, like leaving websites that required registration information, having entered faked registration information, so you're not alone, having refrained from shopping, specifically here in the US, but would in principle be willing to give out data if they got something valuable in return.
So these studies look, interesting, but they're 5 years old or more, and so much has changed in the 5 years since then in terms of the amount of people online and their makeup.
Yeah.
So
All studies consistently, so that was the big boom of studies in the early 2000s. There were still studies made 2004, and I'm aware of one study 2005. All of them consistently show that if you ask people, then they tell you they are very much privacy concerned, etc., etc. I will later, the way I'm phrasing is very careful, as you notice. I will later show that asking people about privacy concerns is not the only possible and maybe not the best way of finding out about privacy-related issues. And there's already a couple of studies that demonstrate this. Yeah?
Do you have additional details on what specifically they're concerned about when you talk about privacy? Is it name and address, phone number? Or
There is studies that show that certain data is more easily divulged than others. There is gender differences, so location information. Men are much more willing to divulge phone number and address than women. There is a difference whether you ask people whether they should about their own data or those of their children. So yes, there is differences in the types of data and people's stated willingness to give them out. However, there is again mentioned, if you run experiments where you put people in a situation, then you can see that what people do often differs widely from what people stated previously they would do. So there's at least 3 experiments that I'm aware of where this has been clearly demonstrated. Okay, now personalization requires personal data. and people are reluctant to give out personal data if you ask them. So is this an either-or situation? Is there fundamental conflict between personalization and privacy? There is some discussion in the literature, at least in the online literature, marketing literature. Our answer is, it's not simple as this, as either or, but rather the answer is more complex. And here's a kind of quick summary of what the answer is. I will later give a model that justifies the answer a little bit more, and also show an experiment that motivates that this answer is valuable. And all this is kind of the foundation of an approach that I coined privacy-enhanced personalization. And essentially the starting point is that you respect users' privacy, no matter whether this is users' individual privacy preferences, or if you're in a country and a state that has privacy legislation enacted, the respective privacy laws, or there's also industry privacy agreements. If you sign up for privacy seals nowadays, these organizations do not only sign off that you match what you claim you would do, but rather you also have to maintain minimum privacy standards. So start out with respecting all this. Then the second thing you should definitely do is to provide benefits. There is studies already that show no matter whether you have good or bad privacy, it also matters what your benefits are that you provide, including personalization within the constraints that are possibly set by respecting people's privacy, but try to personalize in an optimal manner within this constraint space. Then increasing users' understanding also seems to be very important. I'll show you this later. So don't do too much magic. Surprising the user once in a while is fine, but in general only do things that users understand. If you suspect that users don't understand it, then provide an explanation. So Amazon resorted to that a while ago. All this will increase users' trust. And then kind of be patient. It's not a one-shot thing, but rather this is a process. Users always start out to be very cautious, and over the time they gain trust. And if you make it clear to users what their benefits are, and short-term benefits are better than long-term benefits, that's already very well established. Immediate gratification is quite important. Then users themselves will come forward with their data permissions. And based on that, on the additional data, on the additional permissions, you should provide what you promised here, so increase the benefits. So it's a kind of cycle, a loop. It has to do with relationship building in the most general sense. I'm going to show you a little experiment that gives some indications that this basic position is worthwhile. It's an experiment on how you should convey the privacy practices of your company. And as you know, the standard way of conveying the privacy practices to users is to publish a privacy policy or privacy statement. If you ask users, again, large number finds them very important. Large number of respondents feel that it makes them more comfortable providing personal information. 73% of respondents claim that they viewed privacy policies in the past. 26% claim that they always view privacy policies. If you look at the server side, you will find figures far less than 1%. So there is such a discrepancy between what people state they do and what they effectively do. This is no wonder, because there is already findings from reading sciences that privacy policies are written in a manner that is whose reading level is far higher than what should be. This has to do with the fact that privacy policies are very important legal documents. So companies can be sued if they do not behave as they state in this document. So we tried to come up with a different approach to conveying to people what a company will do with the data. And our approach is that we claim that every website should have, in principle, two elements. One is a link to a traditional privacy policy. So we do not want to get rid of the traditional privacy policies, mostly not for legal reasons. There is an important legal part for that, which we cannot replace completely. But we say that in addition to privacy policies, websites for each and every entry field should provide very clear and context-specific information on why this data is solicited and what benefits users will incur when they provide this data. So all in all, this amounts to breaking up this huge document to tiny pieces that are related to the specific entry fields in the field. And here you see an example. Here's a question, and here the user gets an explanation of what benefits he or she can expect from answering this question, and here is an explanation of how the company is going to treat this information. And the same thing for each and every question that the system poses. And this comes in addition to the traditional privacy link. So essentially what we did here, we grabbed this privacy policy and looked what are the most important sentences from this privacy policy and kind of summarized these sentences here in a more comprehensible manner. Now, this is a nice proposal. Is this proposal any good? And in order to find this out, we ran an experiment where we compared a site that had the traditional design and a site that had more this design. And we did this in Berlin, in Germany, where I'm currently on a sabbatical. And so it was in German, but it's exactly the same what you saw before. Here's the link to the privacy policy. Here are the questions. I'm sorry, I mixed those up. Here are the questions, and here is the context-specific privacy disclosure. There is an additional element here that we introduced for the purposes of our experiment, namely a so-called selection counter, which is 1 million here. We pretended that the system at this point would be able to recommend 1 million books to the user. I explain you later for what purpose we needed that. And back to this here, here's the very same site, but without this additional contextual explanation for each and every question. One quick intermission. Why did we run an experiment? Why didn't we ask people which site they preferred. And that's for exactly the reason that I mentioned before. We already have experiences in the area of privacy that there is a conflict, a divergence between what people tell you out of context and what people actually do if you put them into a specific context and let them act. It seems that people in general are not so good to answer privacy-related questions out of context in an abstract manner, but they are usually quite good in acting in a halfway consistent manner if you put them into a certain context. This does not rule out inquiry-based studies for privacy at all. So we did both, but it's very important also to make observational studies in HCI. We announced this experiment as a kind of test for a new version of a well-known online bookstore. We never told the name of the online bookseller, but we made sure that people could guess who it would be. We pretended that this new version would be able to make recommendations, but would have to ask people about a number of questions. We pointed out that people had no obligation to answer any question. We warned them that data would be supplied to the company. We pointed out that at the end, the system would make recommendations, and people would have the opportunity to buy one book out of the recommended books for a discount of 70%. So people in some ways had an incentive to provide true answers in order to shrink down and to tailor the recommended books better to their interests, because then they could buy a discounted book from those. And we also warned them that if they would buy the book, then they would have to supply bank data and identification data, and also show us their ID and also their bank credentials. Yeah, so there was a kind of, you will see this later again, a step between anonymous recommendation and then deciding to buy a book, whereupon people had to identify themselves. We had 32 questions, several of them allowed from, yeah?
So when you got the ID card, did you fact check to see if they answered the questions?
No, but at least we knew whether name and address information was correct. The reason why we did that is we wanted to to avoid that people could kind of give real interest data, but avoid having to reveal their true identity by giving a different shipping address, girlfriend or whatever. So if they wanted to buy a book, then they really had to stand up for the data, so to speak. So there were 32 questions. Some questions allowed for multiple answers, but not all answer combinations made sense. So the maximum reasonable possible answers was 64. Most questions were about users' interests. Some were a bit sensitive, like users' literary sexual preferences or medical interests, including venereal diseases and things like that. All questions made sense in the context of book recommendation. We took very much care of that. And if people answered questions, this visibly decreased this selection counter, which was completely fake, but people could see, okay, at the start it's 100,000 books, a million books that are being recommended, now it's just 50,000, now it's 2,000. So they could see a progress. And again, they had an incentive at the end to have a small selection set so that their interests are being carefully matched. Then in the third phase, and people were still anonymous in this phase, they got what we claim to be their personal book recommendations. These were 50 books, but everyone got the same set of 50 books. They were selected based on the price, also the interest, presumably interest for students, so popular fiction, politics, travel guides, health advisories, sex advisories, things like that. And they were visibly marked down. And also there was the standard Amazon information available on each of these 50 books. And now people had to decide, did they want to buy one of these books for a high discount, and thereby they had to reveal their identity, or rather not. And those who decided to buy were asked for names, shipping address, and also bank information, and we verified this data.
So was it disclosed that their name would be linked to their preferences? Or?
We left this open, but we warned them at the beginning that all the data would be available to Amazon, to the company that is behind the study. We deliberately left it a little bit anonymous, yeah, so to make it a little bit.
They knew there was potential of it all being linked to them.
Yeah, presumably. Yeah. So put it the other way around. There was nothing that could directly implicate that there was a differentiation between non-identifiable data and identifiable. It was one system, and it was one experiment, and there was no break in between. I distinguish this here for presentation purposes. Okay, and then they completed a questionnaire, and we verified the data. And this was done with students from Humboldt University. Half of them were assigned to one version and the other to the other version of the system. And our starting hypothesis was that people in the second condition, where they got additional explanation about what is being done with their data, what is the privacy policy of the company with respect to each specific data field, and what are the benefits from providing this data, that these people would provide more data. And this is also the result, but we got, interestingly enough, more than what we asked for. So if you count the questions that were answered, this is current systems, just with a privacy policy. This is what we suggested, privacy policy plus contextual explanation for each and every question. Then there was an 8% increase in the questions answered, which is statistically significant. If you look at the answers that were given, some questions allowed for more than one answer, then there's a 20% increase. And interesting enough, if you look at the number of people who eventually decided to buy a book, there's a significant increase, which is approaching significance. So people also bought more books, despite the fact that everyone got the same books recommended.
You gave them the exact same list of recommended books?
Yes.
Again?
Yes. Yeah.
You're approaching significance based on your relatively small sample size?
Yes. Yeah. So that's we did an ANOVA.
Yes. So for the two group of students, are they randomized?
They were randomized. Yes, randomly assigned to one of these conditions. Yeah. We didn't specifically, but it turned out that there was balanced gender. Background, we didn't check very much. It was a relatively homogeneous population, though. They were students in a business, management, public administration school. So it was let's say, an educated section of the general population.
You did not do the reverse afterwards.
Counterbalance it,
Yeah,
you mean?
counterbalance. Yeah, different
Well,
approach that
that's a
eliminate the
problem. I mean,
perception.
you cannot repeat it. We would have loved to do a within subject study, but unfortunately, you can't do it. Yeah.
So what you really want to tease out here is, what's causing the increased book buying. And there's, two possible explanations. One is, I think these are really personalized. I think this is a very personalized list. I think, oh yeah, I want that one versus this is just a random thing. This is just a subset from the million that you started with. I didn't give you any information, so it's probably not useful. And there's this other sense of, well, I feel really comfortable with this company and I'm happy to give them money. Kind of 80 cents of which.
Quite frankly, we have no explanation for it. We were heading for this. So our theory is, that's what I presented before, if we respect people's privacy, but do a little bit more incrementally, then you will get people to become more open to provide answers if they see a benefit from it. And so actually this was the result we were targeting at. This was, we were more looking at buying under the perspective that in order to buy, you have to reveal your identity data. So actually we were more interested in how many people are willing to give out their names, addresses, connected with all the preferences that they gave before. So we are not, it's nice that people bought more, but for us it was more interested that they were willing to go so far to disclose their identity. And under this aspect, it's quite interesting. And this would also be our prime explanation if it were the purchase were completely free. That people simply revealed their identities to a larger extent because their fear of disclosure was kind of counterbalanced by the benefit that they got. Now they had to pay a little bit on top of this, but probably this is negligible. What is also interesting is attitudinal questions that we asked. Of course, more people believe in the second condition that privacy has priority. Data is used responsibly. But interestingly enough, more people in the second condition believe that data allowed store to select better books.
When did you ask that question?
Excuse me?
When did you ask the perception?
Afterwards.
But isn't that based on the books that they're presented? Because that could be sort of skewed.
But everyone got the
50
same.
random books. It has nothing to do with my preference.
But in both conditions, everyone got the same books, but nevertheless, in the second condition, so if we gave all these contextualized explanations, then 20% had a better impression, let's call it, of the service quality of the store, even though the service was objectively the same. And that's quite interesting. So here we have no clear answer to that. Here the identity revealing might be the answer. Here we more believe that the general perception of the store extended to the service quality. But we have nothing to back this up. This is actually also an unintended side result. Yeah?
So did you provide any incentive to the student to buy some books?
A discount, 70% discount.
And then so before the experiment, do you tell them, well, this is a small, whatever bookstore there, which is pretty good, you don't worry about, some instruction to students. Otherwise, students may think that, well, the credit card given away, they may suffer from personal loss in the future. What kind of instruction you gave to students to make them feel a little comfortable with the purchase to begin with?
We told them that at the end they would have the possibility to purchase one of the recommended books for a high discount. We said a 70% discount. So they knew right from the beginning that they would be rewarded if they could ensure that the recommendations fit their interests, which we think prodded them to give truthful answers.
So from this data, it appears that giving contextual explanation helps them get a better understanding, but you didn't test whether they would get pissed off, they have more to read, and drop out in the middle.
Say it again.
You didn't test the hypothesis that the users would have more to read and then stop answering questions if they had the option.
Yeah. There's many things that we didn't test. Yeah, so it's kind of a spot, yeah, a sweet spot.
I'm trying to determine whether from this we should conclude that explanations are unquestionably desirable.
I mean, put it this way, they don't hurt. Yeah, so in the policy of privacy-enhanced personalization, they're definitely good. The more, excuse me?
How do we know that?
In principle, from HCI, increased understanding increases users' trust in the system. Yeah, in the generic. Yeah. And from this, I derive the claim for privacy-enhanced personalization. Make things clear to users.
I guess there's also just a general observation about the demographics of the people you ask, right, which are all students, right? And so, our biggest challenge around disclosures and notice is the 250 million other people that we have to provide user interfaces for, where every word has to be scrutinized, and you have to really think about this together.
Yeah. I'm happy with this. However, educated people are the most privacy-concerned group of people. In the US, it's additionally the elderly people who are generally in the top privacy-concerned category. So we picked a group that generally reveals a relatively high privacy concerned attitude.
I guess I have a slightly different question, which would be, for people who don't normally think about privacy, could you make privacy a market differentiator? And by making them aware of even the privacy issues, suddenly they become more interested if you do it in the right way. And if you did it right, you suddenly become the preferred way they do e-commerce. You know what I'm saying?
Several people asked
this. Just write people up because we don't currently think privacy is important.
Yeah. Several people asked this question already. We have no definite answer, but I mean 1/3 increase in sale might be an interesting indication that there could be a...
Would you get that same increase from a set of people who don't care about privacy?
Yeah.
And could you suddenly get even a bigger shift in how many people purchase?
So to give a better answer to your question, one would have to replicate this experiment.
Is there any desire to do so?
Maybe, with some support, yes. I mean, it's not the task of academia anymore to do this on a broader basis. But definitely yes. Also, I mean, there's a couple of other problems here that I didn't discuss yet. Site reputation. Is the effect the same? I mean, Amazon.de, which we used, has a good reputation. We tested for that. It ranks top in a number of 10 names that we gave. Can we replicate the same for less known sites? The answer to this is yes. We did this in the meantime for a site where we made sure that its reputation is lower than that of Amazon and got similar results. So we have the same effect that our disclosures have a positive impact on question answering, but also purchase behavior. Amazon.e has a very good privacy policy. So intuitively speaking, putting this up for making this one visible to users. We don't do this, we don't do this, we don't do this. It's actually good for the company. what if a company has a less stringent privacy policy? Will making this more visible also increase people's proclivity to answer questions? Probably not, but we would like to find this out. Then this relates to a question before. All these explanations occupy quite a lot of screen real estate. If web designers tell us that's impossible, we can't waste so much space, put this in the second layer. So have an icon explanation, and then explanation will
Did you
bump
also
up or
look
so.
at possibly just having one section at the bottom of the question? It doesn't make it very long.
Yeah.
The
We didn't look at that,
so-
yeah. We didn't look at that, yeah. We just wanted to look at the form that we felt will be most effectful, and then have kind of variants and do this slowly one by one. So this is a very interesting question from a commercial point of view. Will the availability of explanations, but only in a second layer, have the same effect? And also, we're a little bit concerned about legal ramifications. What we present is actually just a quick summary of what the company is doing. Now, if we have a footnote, a kind of small print, read the full disclosure for full information, we are already used to look at something like that with a little bit of skepticism. So, do we need an explicit reference to a full disclosure? And if so, will people become a little bit more cautious if we have this? So all this is still unclear. And so finally, I give you this model that I promised. It has trust in the center, and it's, let's call it my personal summary of the current consensus in the literature on privacy, trust, etc., and personalization, how things interact. I start out here. Personalization, if users perceive benefits, and again, immediate benefits are much better than long-term benefits, this will increase users' trust. And more trust leads to more willingness of people to disclose personal data, which usually leads to better personalization. So in general, the more data you have about people, the better you will be able to provide personalized interaction. So this is a kind of positive feedback loop. Perceived benefits surely increases people's willingness to buy, but of course there's many, many other factors also that contribute to that. Now, understanding also increases trust. That's known from HCI. If control increases trust, it's also known from HCI. Perceived privacy most likely also increases trust. There were several experiments conducted in the MIS literature. Control of data most likely increases perceived privacy. And we, with our experiment, worked mostly on the understanding level, so explaining things to people, and specifically explaining privacy better to people. And also by giving them the option of not answering questions at all, we gave them some sort of feel of control. So probably that's where our experiment worked. We did nothing here, so we had no personalization in the system, but nevertheless people felt they had personalization benefits, which is quite interesting. I will leave it like this. if you have questions, this.
Talk about the projects coming at the workshop.
Yes. If your interest is keen, or there's a workshop coming up during the CHI conference, before the CHI conference in Montreal, and JC is on the program committee, so it's worthwhile going there. This is for people who do research in this area or want to do research in this area and want to talk with colleagues about their experiences.
So if there's a positive feedback, where do things stop? There must be something that maybe hinder, stop the positive. Otherwise, you go forever, which is not
Sure.
the case, we know.
Yeah, it's not a linear function, but
Yeah, so what's the factor that somehow, prevent?
I don't know. Yeah, so
It's a model.
it's a sketchy model. Yeah, don't regard it as a
Well, if something doesn't go well, they will actually interfere
sure.
with
Yeah.
something.
Don't regard it as a model theoretic approach, but it's just what has effect on what other factors. And if you look at it like this kind of enforces also the view that personalization and privacy is not a one-shot thing, but rather it's a process. It's about, there's the word customer relationship management, and this is part of it. So a proactive privacy policy is, according to this experiment, very useful, and there is nothing wrong in putting privacy up front. So when I came here to Microsoft at the reception counter, I saw a note about the privacy policy with regard to being tracked as a visitor. That's good. Not only at the reception desk, but also seemingly on websites that want people to provide data in order that they can give better recommendations.
There's some factors like credit card. You probably the risk is only $50 because otherwise so there's some certain limit for the risk that may encourage people to have less concern on the privacy.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah, so there was a study an old study by Ackerman and Craner, who asked people specifically these kinds of data, to whom would you, about yourself, your children, I think your spouse, but maybe I'm mistaken, when would you give them out? And there's clearly a tendency that there are data that are less sensitive and data that are more sensitive. So one can loosely rank data. It varies between people, but the average values are relatively constant. We also did a little analysis what contributed to people's increased answers. Is it that people, is there a pattern? Do people generally answer all questions more frequently, or is it specific questions that people answer more frequently? And we found that both is true. So there is a tendency that people simply give more answers or answer more questions, but it's also a little bit focused on these sensitive questions that I mentioned, so people's literary sexual preferences. But neither of those is statistically significant. But when one sees a trend that it goes both ways. Yep.
So your approach focused on explicitly provided information, but a lot of recommendation systems are based on implicit information. So if you have any ideas or recommendations or any work on recommendation systems that are derived from these types of implicit information.
Yeah, so our general claim, but this experiment doesn't address it, that providing privacy information will both make people more willing to explicitly provide data, but also make them more willing to give permission to sites collecting data about themselves. So this approach does not say very much about the specific mechanism that you use, but rather about people's attitude with respect to letting the company use such data. And we feel that it will go both ways, both with respect to explicit data and implicitly acquired data. We have some completely different line of research that I skipped here, which may be interesting for you. If you have, at a given point, several possible personalization methods, several algorithms that you could use, which vary in their privacy implications. So some only use demographic data, some use explicitly provided data, some use implicit data. We try to come up with a system architecture that allows us to, at any given point, to use the best personalization methods that are permitted under the given privacy constraints. And these privacy constraints are specified by users, what they tell us they don't want or they do want, the privacy laws that may possibly apply, also industry regulations. So we are working on an architecture that gives each and every user his personalized architecture that contains methods only that are permitted under the given privacy constraints. And we work with a product line approach that allows to do this in an efficient manner and also to combine users that have the same privacy constraints. This is not only interesting from the point of view that different people may have different privacy preferences, but there is also now quite a lot of international privacy laws, and many privacy laws also subject foreign sites to the national privacy laws. That is, if you have a site, say in the US, even though there's no national privacy law in the US, you may be subject to different national laws if you sell to people abroad. For instance, Australia has such a law, also European Union to a certain extent. And so here it also becomes more and more interesting to have privacy enforcement that is very much tailored to each individual user. All right, thank you very much.
For those of you who joined us late, you can find out information about Alfred Kobza at our external privacy researcher site. Hold on. Oh. Hold on, let me just log in real quick.
Hey, Eric.